Welcome to the world behind midnight, where darkness reveals what daylight hides. Not all enemies wear uniforms. Some wear faces you recognize until the moment they stop pretending. In 1942, 11 American soldiers entered the Philippine jungle, searching for Japanese forces. What found them first didn't carry rifles. It carried hunger older than any war we understood. The Philippine heat in February 1942 didn't just touch your skin. It crawled inside your lungs and made a home there. Every breath tasted like copper and vegetation rot. Like the jungle itself was exhaling into your mouth and waiting to see if you'd choke. We landed in Capiz province 3 days after Manila fell. The war was already lost. We just hadn't admitted it yet. Command sent us anyway because maps needed updating and radio stations needed positioning, and someone had to pretend we still controlled territory we'd never really understood. I was Corporal Benjamin Hayes, 24 years old, radio operator. Blessed with enough education to know Morse code, and cursed with enough imagination to see patterns in static that probably weren't there. My hands were good with equipment. My mind was good with doubt. Sergeant Will Nelson ran our unit. A Carolina man with shoulders like load-bearing walls, and a voice that could carry through artillery fire without raising above conversation volume. He'd served in Panama and Haiti before this, places where the trees hid different kinds of death. He told us tropical deployment was all the same. You watched for snakes, minded your water discipline, and trusted your training over your instincts. Private Thomas Garrett was our youngest at 19. Farm boy from Iowa, with hands that knew soil and seasons. He smiled at monsoons like they were spring rain back home. He whistled while he walked. He treated the war like an agricultural problem that hard work could eventually solve. Our medic was Corporal Samuel Tran, second-generation Californian, who'd had to prove his loyalty 3 times before they'd let him deploy. He kept his morphine supply organized like a librarian shelving books. He smoked hand-rolled cigarettes that smelled like cloves and never quite went out, even in the wet. 2 Filipino scouts joined us at the staging area. Staff Sergeant Domingo and Corporal Magno. They moved through vegetation like water finding cracks in stone. Silent and inevitable. Domingo had fought bandits in Mindanao before the Americans arrived. Magno had grown up in these provinces, knew the dialects, knew which plants fed you, and which ones made you wish they'd killed you faster. Neither of them smiled when we showed them our mission route on the operations map. Magno traced the red line with his finger and stopped where it curved around a series of elevation marks labeled only as forested highland. This area, he said quietly, has old names, names that don't translate well. Nelson asked what that meant in practical terms. Magno looked at Domingo. Some conversation happened between them without language, the kind men have when they've shared enough close calls that words become optional. It means, Domingo finally said, we walk carefully. We watch what invites us. We don't accept hospitality from strangers after dark. We laughed because that's what soldiers do when advice sounds like something your grandmother would say before sending you into a thunderstorm with an umbrella. The village sat where the jungle opened its fist slightly and let sunlight reach the ground. 30 structures on bamboo stilts arranged in loose rows. Smoke from cooking fires hung in the trees like thoughts that couldn't quite form into words. Children watched us from doorways with eyes that calculated our pack weights and weapon conditions and decided we weren't worth running from. Women tended gardens that grew vegetables I didn't recognize. Men repaired fishing nets with the patience of people who understood hunger came in seasons and you prepared during abundance for the inevitable scarcity. The village headman met us in the central clearing near a water pump that looked older than American involvement in these islands. His name was Vicente. His handshake felt like testing wood for rot, firm pressure searching for soft spots that would give under stress. He offered us coconut water from shells his daughter brought on a wooden tray. The liquid tasted clean and slightly sweet, better than anything that came from our canteens. We drank and thanked him, and asked about Japanese patrol patterns in the region. Vicente told us the Imperial Army hadn't been seen in Cappies for 2 weeks. They'd moved north toward better roads and larger towns. He told us this without satisfaction, like describing whether that would eventually change regardless of preference. "But you're not alone here," Nelson said. It wasn't a question. Vicente's expression didn't change. "We're never alone. The forest provides. The forest demands. We maintain the balance as our families have for generations beyond counting." An older woman approached from one of the larger houses. Her hair was white as salt, pulled back severe enough to make her face look like polished wood grain. She wore a dress that might have been black or very dark blue, fabric so old it had achieved a texture between cloth and leather. They called her Lola Bonita. Lola meant grandmother, Domingo explained. It was a term of respect for elder women, regardless of blood relation. She carried authority the way some people carry weapons, visible without being threatening until circumstances changed. She studied each of us with attention that felt medical. Not unkind, but diagnostic. Searching for symptoms of conditions she'd seen before and could predict the progression of. When her gaze settled on me, I felt my skin prickle, like I'd walked through a spiderweb I couldn't see. Her eyes were dark brown, going black in the pupils, and they didn't blink as often as eyes should. Each blink felt deliberate, like she was deciding whether to keep looking or turn away and spare me something. "You," she said, pointing at me specifically, "carry questions louder than your equipment." I told her I was a radioman. Questions were part of signal analysis. You had to ask if the message was clear before you could trust what it said. She almost smiled. "The forest sends messages too, very clear ones. Most people choose not to listen until the message has already been delivered in full." She turned to address all of us, voice carrying without strain. "There are rules here, simple ones. Follow them and you'll leave unharmed. Ignore them and you'll discover why we maintain them." Nelson asked what kind of rules we were talking about. Practical security measures, cultural sensitivities, areas off limits, due to ordnance or terrain hazards. Lola Bonita shook her head slowly. Salt at every threshold, garlic above every door. Vinegar keeps away flies and other things that drink without permission. Ash across entry points creates barriers certain movements cannot cross. When you hear counting in the darkness, count faster and louder. When something asks you to follow it into the trees, you decline politely and walk the other direction. Garrett laughed, short and nervous. "Ma'am," respectfully, "that sounds like survival," she interrupted. "It sounds like survival, which you will need if you insist on camping near the old Belit Grove. Your map marks as a suitable radio relay position." Domingo's expression changed. His jaw tightened, and his eyes found Magno's face, searching for confirmation of something unspoken. "The Belit," Magno said carefully. "That's the location command selected." Nelson confirmed it. High ground, good sight lines, existing clearing that wouldn't require vegetation removal. Tactically sound by every field manual standard. "The clearing exists," Magno said, "because things clear it, not people, not weather. Things that prefer open spaces where they can watch what enters and what tries to leave." Lola Bonita invited us into her home without making it sound optional. The interior was darker than the afternoon sun suggested it should be, cooler too. Herbs hung from ceiling beams in bundles that released scents when we passed beneath them. Medicinal, pungent, earthy in ways that made my sinuses clear and my thoughts sharpen involuntarily. She showed us her preparations. Salt and lines so precise they looked like someone had used a ruler and level. Garlic braided into ropes that hung over every window and doorframe. Small mirrors, positioned at odd angles throughout the room, reflecting surfaces that caught light and threw it in directions that created illuminated corridors through the space. Mirrors confuse them, she explained. They see their reflection and don't recognize what they've become. It causes hesitation. During hesitation, you have time to act. Tran asked, careful with his phrasing. What exactly would be confused by seeing itself? Lola Bonita pulled back a cloth covering a wooden chest. Inside were items arranged with the care of surgical instruments. Stingray tails dried and hardened into whips. Bundles of specific herb combinations. Small clay jars sealed with wax. A bolo knife with a blade that had been sharpened so many times, the edge looked like a line of light rather than metal. The Manananggal, she said. During day, she walks among us. Normal woman, wife, mother, merchant. She smiles. She helps neighbors. She attends festivals. At night, the torso separates from the legs at the waist. The upper body grows wings like a corrupted bat. The tongue extends, thin and hollow, searching for life to drain from the unaware. She touched the stingray tail. This burns them like silver burns certain European monsters. The barb carries venom that remains potent long after death. 3 strikes disable the wings. 5 kills if you're fortunate enough to land them. And if we don't believe, Nelson said carefully, in monsters that split in half and hunt on wings. Lola Bonita closed the chest. Then you'll die, confused. Disbelief doesn't create immunity. It just makes you easier prey. She walked to her doorway and pointed toward our intended campsite. Visible through the trees is a break in the canopy maybe half a mile distant. The Balik Grove has stood for centuries. The tree itself is older than Spanish occupation, older than memory can measure. It's a strangler fig that consumed its host so completely that no one remembers what grew there first. Now the Balit stands alone, hollow in places, roots like prison bars. Things nest in hollow trees. Things wait in the spaces between roots. Things that have learned patience beyond human understanding. Vicente joined us, carrying fresh water in bamboo containers. 3 months ago, a logging crew camped there. 5 men with modern tools and rifles for hunting. They stayed 4 nights. On the 5th morning, 2 were gone. No tracks leading away. No signs of struggle. Just empty bedrolls and tools left behind. The remaining 3, Lola Bonita continued, left immediately. 1 made it to the next province before he stopped speaking entirely. Shock, the doctors said. Psychological trauma. The other 2 still fish in the river, but they won't discuss what they saw. They cross themselves when children ask about the missing men. She handed each of us a small cloth pouch. Inside was salt mixed with ash and what might have been dried herbs ground to powder. Sprinkle this around your sleeping area every night. If you hear the tick-tick sound, you'll know something approaches. The sound is loudest when the creature is distant, nearly silent when it hovers above you. This is how it hunts. This is how it has always hunted. We established camp in the Balit clearing at 1600 hours. The tree dominated the space like a cathedral built by something that didn't understand proper architecture. Multiple trunks twisted together. Aerial roots dropping from branches to create curtains of wood that swayed slightly in breezes that didn't seem to exist elsewhere. The clearing was maybe 40 yards in diameter. The ground was packed earth with scattered leaf litter, but no undergrowth. No ferns, no saplings, no bushes. Just bare dirt and the tree in silence that felt thicker than the jungle noise surrounding us. Garrett walked the perimeter, counting his steps out of habit. Military training taught you to measure your ground automatically. He stopped at the northern edge, where roots formed an archway large enough to walk through if you ducked slightly. "Hey, Corporal Hayes," he called. "You should see this." I joined him. He was pointing at marks on one of the roots. Scratches, parallel lines, 4 of them, each about 3 inches long, carved deep enough into the wood that sap had wept and dried dark. "Claws," I suggested. "Maybe. But look at the spacing. Too wide for a monkey, too precise for random animal marking. And they're all the same depth, same angle, like someone held something rigid and dragged it deliberately." Tran examined the marks with professional attention. Could be a tool, harvesting sap or stripping bark for medicinal use. Indigenous populations have sophisticated botanical knowledge we often misinterpret as supernatural. Magno crouched beside us, not touching the marks, but studying them from inches away. Not tools, not monkeys. These are from nails, fingernails that grow long after the separation. After the torso leaves the legs behind, and the human parts become optional. Nelson ordered us to establish defensive positions, regardless of threat assessment. Standard procedure: you treat every location as potentially hostile, until proven otherwise. We strung tripwire between trees, hung tin cans that would rattle if anything disturbed the lines. Set up watch rotation with overlapping fields of observation. Domingo and Magno created salt lines at tent entrances without asking permission. They worked methodically, pouring from canvas bags, patting the white crystals into the dark earth until lines maybe 2 inches wide surrounded each shelter. When Garrett started to object, Nelson stopped him with a raised hand. Their ground, their rules. We're guests who don't know the territory. You don't refuse local expertise just because it doesn't appear in field manuals. The sun set fast in the tropics. No gentle twilight, no golden hour. Just daylight, until suddenly there wasn't, and darkness arrived like a door closing. The jungle adjusted its voice. Daybirds went silent. Nightbirds began conversations in tones that sounded like questions asked in languages we'd never studied. I took first watch, 2200 to midnight. Standard radio check at 2230. Static was heavy tonight. Atmospheric conditions creating interference that made every transmission sound like it was traveling through water. HQ acknowledged our position report. They signed off with routine instructions. Maintain communication schedules. Report any enemy activity. Conserve rations. They didn't mention monsters. Their world still made sense. At 2347, the jungle stopped talking. Not gradual, not fading. Just sudden silence, like someone had turned a volume knob to 0. The absence was so complete, it became its own kind of sound, a pressure against eardrums that made you want to pop your jaw to relieve it. I stood slowly, rifle already in my hands before I'd consciously decided to move. Training does that. Your body reacts while your mind is still processing. The salt line at my tent entrance glowed faintly in the moonlight. I stared at it for several seconds, watching for disturbance, seeing none. The white crystals sat undisturbed, perfect, and absurd, and suddenly the most important thing in my reality. TTK, TTK. Soft sound, almost inaudible. Rhythmic clicking, like someone tapping fingernails against wood in another room. The sound was so quiet, I had to hold my breath to hear it. Close, I thought. The quiet means close. I turned my head slowly, searching for the source. The bolete tree loomed in darkness, its twisted silhouette blocking stars. Something moved among the aerial roots, not wind. Wind doesn't move with purpose. This had intention behind it, deliberate motion that paused and continued, and paused again. A shape detached from the trunk. At first, I thought it was a large bird. Then my mind adjusted the scale and perspective, and I realized what I was seeing was much larger than any bird should be. The torso was human, from waist to shoulders. Female shape, visible even in darkness. Arms that hung loose. Fingers trailing almost to where legs should have been, but weren't. Instead of legs, the body ended in ragged tissue that trailed like torn fabric. And from the back, wings, membranous, leathery, spreading wide enough to blot out the section of stars behind them. The head turned toward me. In the moonlight, I saw features. A woman's face, almost beautiful, smiling. Then the tongue emerged. It extended from her mouth, like rope being lowered from a height, thin and dark and impossibly long. It tasted the air between us, moving with insect-like precision. I tried to raise my rifle. My arms wouldn't obey. My throat had closed. My training had prepared me for human enemies, for mechanical threats, for tactical problems that could be solved with firepower and proper spacing. It hadn't prepared me for this. The creature tilted its head, studying me with interest that felt almost gentle. Then it began to drift forward, wings moving in slow beats that made no sound. It covered 10 feet in a single movement, floating rather than flying. The tick-tick sound grew louder as it approached. The distance lie, the volume inverse. Everything Lola Bonita had warned us about was happening exactly as she'd described, and I'd laughed at her. My hand found the salt pouch in my pocket. I threw it without aiming. The cloth bag tumbled through the air and struck the creature's shoulder. Salt scattered, white crystals catching moonlight as they fell. The thing recoiled, not pain, but revulsion, like I'd thrown acid. The wings beat once, hard, and it rose 15 feet in a single surge. The mouth opened. The sound that emerged was wrong in every frequency, high-pitched and rattling, and filled with hate that had been accumulating for much longer than any human lifespan. Then it was gone, not flying away, just gone. Disappeared into darkness that seemed to swallow it completely. The jungle sounds returned, gradual crescendo, like musicians tuning instruments. Within 30 seconds, nightbirds were calling again, and insects had resumed their sawing songs, and nothing suggested the previous silence had ever existed. I stood there shaking until Tran found me during his watch rotation check at midnight. He asked if I was all right. I told him I'd seen something. He asked what. I couldn't answer. How do you describe something your mind kept insisting wasn't possible? We didn't sleep well that night. None of us did. Morning brought heat that steamed moisture from leaves and turned the air into soup. We conducted routine maintenance on equipment. Nelson assigned patrol routes. Garrett checked tripwires and found 2 already sprung during the night. Tin cans displaced. Thin wires snapped clean through, rather than stretched or tangled. Animal, he said, but his voice had doubt in it. Maybe wild pig rooting around. The tracks told different stories. Human feet, bare, pressed deep into the mud near our western perimeter. But the feet were too long, toes too splayed, and they stopped after 4 steps. Just ended in the middle of open ground, like whatever made them had learned to fly between one footfall and the next. Magno photographed the prints with a Kodak brownie he carried for documentation. He didn't comment. He didn't need to. The images would speak for themselves if anyone ever looked at them without prejudice. I reported the night encounter during morning assembly. Tried to keep my language neutral, observational. I'd seen something large moving in the tree. Something with wings, possibly a large bat or a flying fox displaced by our presence. Defensive response to thrown salt suggested learned behavior, perhaps association with hunting dogs that had been trained using salt as negative reinforcement. I was lying. We all knew I was lying, but lies that sound like reasonable possibilities are easier to accept than truths that destroy the foundation of what you believe reality can contain. Nelson listened without interruption. When I finished, he nodded once. Maintain heightened watch protocols. Alternate 2-man positions during dark hours. Keep salt compounds accessible. Nobody moves alone after sunset. That evening, we returned to the village for water resupply. The hand pump in our clearing produced liquid with too much sediment. We needed clean water for the radio batteries and personal consumption. Vicente greeted us with the same measured courtesy as before. His daughter brought food. Rice with small dried fish, vegetables stewed with coconut milk. We ate gratefully while children watched from doorways with eyes that had seen too much already. Lola Bonita joined us as dusk approached. She carried the cloth-covered chest I'd seen yesterday. She set it between us and removed the covering with ceremony that felt like revealing religious artifacts. "You saw her?" she said to me. Not question, statement. I confirmed it. Good. Fear means you're paying attention. Arrogance gets men killed faster than any monster. Fear keeps you careful. She selected a stingray tail whip from the chest and handed it to me. Take this. Keep it accessible. If she comes close enough that salt doesn't drive her away, you use this. Aim for the wings. 3 strikes disable flight. She falls and becomes vulnerable. I accepted the weapon. The tail was maybe 2 feet long, dried to black hardness, still retaining the barb that could puncture boot leather. The handle was wrapped in leather that had absorbed decades of palm sweat from previous owners. How many people have carried this? I asked. Enough that the leather remembers their fear. Enough that the tale knows its purpose. Enough that you won't be the last if you survive to pass it to someone else who needs it. She gave similar weapons to Nelson, Tran, and Garrett. Domingo and Magno already carried their own, older than ours. Edges worn smooth from use. We didn't want to imagine details of a young woman approached from the largest house. She was maybe 19, visibly pregnant, moving with the careful balance of someone carrying weight that changed their center of gravity. Her name was Maria. Her belly was enormous for her frame, suggesting twins or late-term pregnancy close to delivery. She wouldn't look at any of us directly. Her eyes stayed on the ground, on her hands, on anything except human faces. Lola Bonita touched her shoulder gently, and she flinched but didn't pull away. Maria hears the TTK every night now, Lola Bonita explained. The Manananggal knows there's life inside her. It's waiting for the birth, waiting for the moment when the child is vulnerable and the mother is weakened from labor. Maria's hands rested on her belly, protective and futile. It calls to me, she whispered, uses my mother's voice. She died 2 years ago, but I hear her calling from the forest, telling me to come, telling me she has things to show me. You don't go, I said. I don't go, but I want to. The voice is so familiar, so kind. It knows everything my mother knew. Stories she told me, songs she sang, private things nobody else could know. How does it know those things? Lola Bonita's expression was grim. They learn by watching, by listening. They've lived here for generations, longer than our families. They know our stories because they've been present for all of them. They remember what we forget. Vicente brought more salt, bags of it, heavy canvas sacks that must have represented significant expense for a village this remote. He began creating lines around Maria's house, thick barriers, 3 inches wide, unbroken circles that sealed every entrance. The baby comes soon, he said. Maybe days, maybe tonight. When the birth happens, the Manananggal will try harder. It will use every voice Maria loves, every memory that makes her weak. We must be stronger than her grief. We returned to camp as full darkness arrived. The walk back felt longer than it should have. Trees leaned in, branches forming archways we didn't remember passing through on the outward journey. Shadows moved adjacent to our path, keeping pace, but never visible when directly observed. Garrett walked close to me. Corporal, I need to ask something, and I need you to give me a straight answer. I told him I'd try. Do you believe it? What they're telling us? Monsters that split apart and hunt on wings. I wanted to lie. Lying would have been kinder. I saw something last night. Something that didn't belong in any taxonomy I've studied. Whether it matches their terminology exactly, or whether we're dealing with an unknown species that inspired their legends, I can't say. But something is here. Something predatory. Something that understands we're vulnerable. He absorbed that in silence. Then, how do we kill it? According to Lola Bonita, we strike the wings with stingray barbs. We use salt and vinegar to create barriers it won't cross. We maintain light discipline so it can't approach without being seen. We don't respond to familiar voices calling from darkness. And if those methods don't work, if this is just a large bat, or some other mundane explanation, then we've wasted salt and carried ridiculous weapons, and we'll look stupid in the after-action report. I can live with looking stupid. I can't live with dying because I refused to accept evidence that contradicted my training. That night, I took middle watch, 020, 020, 400. Tran sat with me, neither of us sleeping despite the schedule, saying we should be. The radio emitted soft static, white noise that almost sounded like breathing if you listened long enough. At 0247, the TKT began, loud this time. Clear clicking from somewhere beyond our perimeter, out toward the village, rhythmic and steady. The sound of something announcing its presence, confident we'd hear and understand the meaning. Tran grabbed his rifle. That's the sound. That's what Lola Bonita described. We woke the others. Nelson ordered defensive positions, full alert status. We crouched behind cover with weapons oriented outward, watching the darkness beyond our lamplight for movement. The clicking grew louder, closer to village, farther from us. The distance lie inverted. Logic fought with information, and I felt my mind straining to reconcile contradictions. Then screaming from the village, a woman's voice, high and terrified. Single word repeated. No, 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 no. We moved fast, discipline abandoned. You don't sit in defensive positions while civilians scream. You respond. That's training. That's instinct. That's the human reaction to suffering. The village was chaos when we arrived. Lamps burning in every house. People rushing toward Maria's home, where Vicente and 3 other men were forcing the door closed against something trying to push through from outside. Lola Bonita stood in the doorway with her bolo knife raised. Salt lines were broken. Garlic had been torn from the doorframe and thrown into the yard. Something had breached the barriers systematically, understanding exactly what each element represented and removing them in proper sequence. Maria sat inside screaming, hands pressed against her belly. Blood on her dress. Not menstrual blood. Wrong color. Too dark. Too thick. The men forced the door shut. Vicente drove nails through the frame into the wall, sealing it. The hammering echoed across the village, sharp impacts that sounded like gunfire. The tick-tick stopped. Silence rushed in, so complete, my ears rang with it. Every dog in the village had gone quiet. Even the insects had ceased their songs. Lola Bonita approached the window, moving slowly. She carried a lamp that cast her shadow huge against the wall behind her. She set the lamp on the windowsill and peered into darkness beyond the glass. There, she said quietly. We looked. At first I saw nothing. Then the darkness shifted. Not moved, shifted, changed density. Something hung in the air, maybe 20 feet from the house, hovering with wings spread wide. The torso was visible in silhouette. The trailing entrails swayed like kelp in current. The face turned toward us. Even at this distance, even in darkness, I could see it smiling. The tongue extended, tasting the air, searching for the gap it needed. Then it spoke, used Maria's mother's voice. Used words in Tagalog I didn't understand, but everyone else did. Vicente's jaw clenched. Lola Bonita gripped her bolo knife harder. What's it saying? I asked Magno. Promising safety. Promising pain will end if Maria opens the window. Promising her mother waits just outside and wants to embrace her daughter one final time before the baby comes. Maria sobbed. Mama, please, please, I miss you. Lola Bonita slapped her. Sharp crack that silenced the sobbing instantly. That is not your mother. Your mother is dead. Your mother rests in ground blessed by a priest. That thing wears your mother's voice like stolen clothes. Do not listen. The creature outside clicked once. Loud, sharp, irritated sound. Then it rose higher, ascending until it disappeared into darkness above the roof. We heard movement overhead. Claws on thatch. Weight, redistributing. Testing the structure for weaknesses. Vicente and 2 other men went upstairs. We heard footsteps, heard them walking the interior space beneath the roof, heard them pouring something liquid. Vinegar, I realized, splashing it across the ceiling boards in quantities that dripped through gaps. A shriek from above, high-pitched and furious. Then wing beats, heavy air displacement. The thing departed, and we heard it land somewhere distant. The tick-tick resumed, loud, receding, growing quieter as it moved away. It will try again, Lola Bonita said. Tonight or tomorrow. It's patient. It can wait for mistakes, for exhaustion, for the moment when attention lapses and barriers weaken. Maria's water broke an hour later. Labor began in earnest. Lola Bonita sent us away. This was women's work now. Men would be useless except as guards. We returned to camp as dawn broke. Nobody spoke. What was there to say? 3 days passed. We maintained our mission. Strung antenna wire between trees. conducted radio checks with HQ on schedule, mapped terrain features for artillery coordinates nobody would ever use. We pretended we were soldiers doing soldier work while something inhuman hunted nearby. Maria delivered twins, both healthy, both breathing. The village celebrated with prayers and food offerings. They placed mirrors in the baby's room. They hung garlic over the cradle. They never left the children alone, but the titik came every night now. Closer, more persistent. The creature had learned our patterns. It knew our watch rotation. It understood when we were most vulnerable. On the fourth night, it took Garrett. He'd been pulling guard duty at the eastern perimeter. 330 hours. I was supposed to relieve him at 0400. When I arrived at his position, his rifle was there, his helmet was there, his boots were there, laces still tied, but Garrett was gone. His webbing hung from a tree branch 12 feet up. His dog tags swung in breeze that didn't exist, and in the mud below, his footprints stopped mid-stride. The final print showed his boot heel pressed deep, like he'd been lifted suddenly, like something had grabbed him and pulled straight up. No blood, no signs of struggle, just absence. We searched until dawn. Found nothing except more tracks. The same elongated foot shapes we'd documented before. They circled our camp in patterns that suggested intelligence, reconnaissance, study of our defenses. Nelson called formation at first light. We're pulling out. Mission's compromised. We've lost a man to hostile action. We're falling back to secondary positions and requesting extraction. Domingo shook his head. The road north is closed. Japanese patrols. The road south is 3 days' walk through jungle where this thing hunts every night. You won't make it. Then what do you suggest? We sit here and wait for it to take us one by one. Lola Benita arrived before Domingo could answer. She looked older today, worn. Lines in her face that hadn't been visible before. The Manananggal has tasted one of yours now. It knows your scent, your blood. It will follow wherever you go. Distance means nothing to something that flies. You can't outrun it. You can't hide from it. You have one option remaining, which is, Nelson demanded, kill it. Find where it rests during day. Find the legs it leaves behind when it separates. Destroy those legs with salt and ash. When the sun rises and the torso tries to rejoin the lower body, it will find no home to return to. It will burn in daylight. It will die. And how exactly do we find these legs? You follow the tracks backward. You search hollow trees and abandoned structures. You look for places where humans once lived and no longer do. It needs darkness and shelter. It needs privacy for the transformation. There are only so many suitable locations within hunting range. Magno spoke quietly. There is an old missionary church, 2 miles northeast, Spanish, colonial era, abandoned since the revolution. If I were hiding something during daylight, that's where I'd go. We left at midday, when the sun was highest and the shadows were shortest. 5 of us, Nelson, Tran, Domingo, Magno, and myself. We left instructions for HQ in case we didn't return. We carried salt, vinegar, matches, and enough ammunition to fight a platoon-sized element. The church appeared through vegetation like a tooth emerging from diseased gums. Stone walls still standing, but roof collapsed decades ago. Windows empty of glass. Vines claiming every surface. The interior was cool despite tropical heat. Shade and stone created temperature inversion. Our breath misted slightly. Impossible in this climate, but happening anyway. The altar remained intact. Cross still mounted above it, carved from dark wood. Christ's face eroded to feature loss. Something had arranged bones before the altar. Human bones. Femurs, ribs, skulls with teeth intact, arranged in patterns that suggested purpose. Offerings, Magno whispered, to something that doesn't share our understanding of sanctity. We found the legs in what had been the vestry, a small room where priests once prepared for services. The door was sealed from inside with dried mud and what might have been blood. We broke through. The lower body of a woman rested against the far wall, legs folded naturally, as if sitting. The separation point at the waist was clean, surgical, revealing internal anatomy that had been somehow preserved. New rot, new decomposition. The flesh looked alive. The legs wore a dress, simple cotton, locally made, the kind any village woman might wear to market. On the floor beside them sat sandals, personal items, a cloth bag containing betel nut and lime paste for chewing. "This is someone's wife," Tran said quietly. "Someone's mother. During the day, she looks normal, acts normal, goes about normal life. Then at night, she becomes this." Domingo finished. "She transforms. She hunts. She becomes this." Domingo finished. "She transforms. She hunts." Nelson poured salt, thick lines around the legs, boxing them in. Then ash from our fire pit. Then vinegar until the smell burned our throats. The legs twitched, muscles contracting like they'd received electrical shock. The feet kicked once, the knees bent, trying to stand, trying to escape. We poured more salt, more vinegar. The flesh began to smoke, not burning, dissolving, breaking down at molecular level. The legs collapsed inward, like wet paper being crushed. The shriek came from outside. Daylight, midday sun. The Manananggal shouldn't be able to hunt now, but it was here anyway. Desperate, knowing what we'd done. It crashed through the ruined roof. Wings spread impossibly wide, face twisted in rage that had shed all human pretense. The tongue lashed out, struck Nelson's shoulder, knocked him sideways into the wall. Domingo swung his stingray tail, connected with the left wing. The barb punctured membrane. The wing folded. The creature lost altitude. Tran threw salt. Direct hit to the torso. The thing recoiled, clawing at its own chest where skin bubbled and split. I struck with my stingray tail, aimed for the right wing. Missed. Struck the trailing entrails instead. The barb sank in. The creature screamed in frequencies that shattered what remained of the window glass. Magno fired his rifle. 3 rounds. Center mass. The bullets passed through without apparent effect. No blood, no impact damage, like shooting fog. It came at me fast. Tongue extended. I dropped and rolled. Felt cold air where my head had been. The tongue struck stone behind me with a wet slap that left residue glistening on the wall. Domingo struck again. Right wing this time. The barb penetrated deep. The wing joints separated. The creature fell hard, impacting stone floor with a crack like breaking pottery. Nelson grabbed a burning brand from our torch, thrust it into the thing's face. The fire caught on oily skin, spread across the torso. The screaming intensified. Human voice, an animal cry, and something else. Something old and filled with hate. We poured vinegar, the entire bottle. The creature convulsed, skin peeling away, muscles separating from bone. The internal structure becoming visible as the external form dissolved. In the vestry behind us, the legs had become ash, gray powder that smelled like burned meat and spoiled flowers. Nothing remained that could rejoin the torso. The Manananggal understood. You could see comprehension in its eyes. Human eyes. Someone's daughter, someone's wife. Monster by night, dead now. Finally, the flesh dissolved completely. Left only bones. Human skeleton. Nothing supernatural about it now. Just calcium and phosphate, and the end of something that had lived too long. We stood in silence, breathing hard, covered in residue we'd need to burn our uniforms to remove. Mission accomplished, Nelson said quietly. We returned to find the village in celebration. Noosh had traveled somehow. Maybe Lola Bonita had felt it die. Maybe the forest had relaxed its grip. Maybe Maria's twins had started breathing easier. They gave us food. They gave us clean water. They gave us respect that felt heavier than gratitude should be. Lola Bonita pulled me aside as we prepared to depart. You'll carry this now. What you've seen, what you've done. It changes you. Makes you aware of gaps in reality where things slip through. I asked if there were more. More Manananggal. More creatures. Always, she said. The world is larger than your training suggests. Older. Stranger. You've opened your eyes. You can't close them again. That's the price of survival. We left Capiz the following morning. Japanese forces were advancing. Our position was untenable. Command ordered general retreat. The war continued. We followed orders. We fought when we had to. We died when circumstances demanded. I made it home in 1945. Kissed ground that felt safer than any ground should. Got a job, got married, had children who asked why Dad kept salt by every door. I never told them. How do you explain that some hungers don't end with death? That some things hunt with patience measured in generations? That the rules you were taught about what's real are suggestions rather than laws? I kept the stingray tail, still have it oiled and wrapped in cloth, hidden where nobody questions why an old man keeps strange items. Sometimes at night I hear it, faint, almost inaudible. Tick-tick, loud means far, quiet means close. I check the salt lines, I check the garlic, I check the vinegar, I keep in bottles nobody else touches. So far, the barriers hold. So far. If you made it this far, if you're still listening, do me a favor. Check your thresholds tonight. Make sure there are no gaps where air passes uninvited. Make sure your mirrors are positioned correctly. And if you hear counting in the darkness, count faster and louder. Always faster, always louder. Subscribe to The World Behind Midnight, because the stories I tell aren't finished. They're just waiting to see if you're paying attention.